They thought they were arresting just another suspect. But the moment the Admiral walked into court and saluted the man in cuffs, the entire courtroom stood still, and history was rewritten in silence. It was supposed to be a routine morning. The quiet neighborhood of Arlington had never seen flashing lights or armored vehicles. Until that day. Police cars surrounded the small house on the corner lot. Helicopters hovered above. SWAT teams moved in silently, weapons drawn. Within minutes, the door burst open, and a man was dragged out in handcuffs. He didn't resist. No yelling, no panic, just a cold, unshaken stare. His name was Reed Carter, but no one in the neighborhood knew much about him. He kept to himself, walked with a slight limp, and was often seen feeding stray dogs behind his fence. The media called him a suspected threat to national security, though no one explained why. Cameras rolled as officers shoved him into a van. One rookie officer noticed something odd. A faded trident tattoo on Reed's wrist. It was barely visible, but unmistakable to those who knew. It was the insignia of the Navy SEALs. The young officer whispered to his partner, but they brushed it off. "Just another nut job," someone said. But the air felt wrong. Too heavy. Too still. It didn't feel like they'd arrested a criminal. It felt like they'd caged a predator who had allowed it. Back at the station, Reed refused to speak. No phone call. No lawyer. Just silence. But even in that silence, there was a presence. Something in his eyes warned everyone who looked too long. This wasn't a man you put in a cage. He wasn't fighting it, not because he was weak, but because he knew something they didn't. Something was coming, and it would turn their world upside down. The silence around Reed Carter didn't last long. Within 12 hours of his arrest, something strange started to happen. The officer who had cuffed him was pulled from duty. The arresting captain received a phone call from an unlisted number and left the station looking pale and shaken. Files connected to Reed's case mysteriously disappeared from the system. No charges were officially filed. Still, no one knew who he really was. But the whispers had started. A secretary at the Pentagon overheard a name being spoken in hushed tones. Spectre. Not a name in the system, not a rank. Just a call sign. One used in the deepest Black Ops missions. One that hadn't been uttered in over a decade. Meanwhile, in the detention room, Reed sat completely still. One guard made the mistake of trying to intimidate him, slamming a baton on the table. The lights flickered. Without a word, Reed turned his eyes to him, and the guard stumbled back like he'd seen a ghost. That night, Admiral Preston, a legend in the Navy, was contacted directly. He was retired, out of the game. But when he heard the name Reed Carter, he froze. He didn't ask for details. He simply said, "I'm coming." By dawn, the courtroom was prepped for arraignment. Journalists filled the gallery, ready to tear apart another so-called war criminal. But no one expected what happened next. The double doors at the back creaked open. Boots echoed on the floor. Everyone turned. Admiral Preston walked in, full uniform, chest glittering with medals. He didn't sit down. He didn't nod. He walked straight to the prosecution and placed a file on their desk. "Dismiss this immediately," he said, "or the world will learn who Reed Carter really is." The room went dead silent. The courtroom held its breath. Reed Carter sat motionless in cuffs, his expression unreadable. The judge, an older man who'd seen countless cases, looked over his glasses at Admiral Preston. "And who exactly is Mr. Carter?" he asked, voice tinged with skepticism. Preston didn't flinch. He stepped forward, opened the classified file, and slid a photograph across the bench. A grainy image of a rescue mission deep inside hostile territory. In it, a figure barely visible in the shadows carried a wounded Navy pilot on his back, flanked by flames. Below the photo, a single word. Spectre. Gasps echoed as the Admiral began speaking. Reed Carter wasn't just a SEAL, he was the SEAL. The silent ghost behind several high-risk missions that were never acknowledged, whose name never made headlines. He operated off-books, answering directly to the Pentagon. His missions saved hundreds, if not thousands, of lives, many of them in countries that still denied any U.S. presence. Then came the moment no one expected. The judge, still unconvinced, sarcastically asked, "If he's such a legend, why hasn't anyone heard of him?" Without moving, Reed looked up, met the judge's eyes, and said quietly, "Operation Black Rain, check your clearance." The color drained from the judge's face. That operation was sealed tighter than any case in U.S. military history. Only a few were even briefed on its existence. The gallery buzzed. Phones were silenced. The prosecution looked panicked. One lawyer slipped out of the room. The judge cleared his throat, trembling now. "We'll take a recess," he said, but no one moved. Admiral Preston leaned closer to the judge. "You just tried to put a handcuffed Medal of Honor recipient behind bars. He's done more for this country than any man in this room. Think hard before you speak again." When court resumed, the atmosphere had completely changed. Reed was still in cuffs, but now everyone avoided his eyes. Not out of disdain, but respect and shame. The judge sat silently, flipping through documents that had suddenly been declassified mid-recess. Pages stamped, "Top Secret," now bore the stamp, "Cleared by order of defense." Admiral Preston stepped back up, this time holding something tightly in his hand. He approached the bench but didn't speak to the judge. Instead, he walked directly to Reed. With a slow, solemn motion, he placed the small silver medal in Reed's palm. It was the Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, but not just any version. This one had a black stripe threaded through the ribbon. Custom. It meant the mission was never recognized. Reed had earned it deep in Syria, where he rescued 2 hostages and eliminated a warlord before disappearing back into the night like a ghost. Gasps rippled again. One by one, faces in the courtroom began to soften. Officers, prosecutors, even the bailiff who had cuffed him. They began to understand what they were witnessing. A living legend who had carried the burden of silence so others could live loudly in freedom. Then, something unexpected happened. A woman in uniform stepped from the gallery. Her face was scarred, one arm prosthetic. "He pulled me from the wreckage in Kandahar," she said. "I never knew his name, until now." The courtroom was silent, frozen in the weight of truth. Reed didn't speak. He didn't need to. His silence was louder than any defense. Preston turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I request immediate dismissal of all charges, and an apology." The judge, now visibly shaken, nodded slowly. "Mr. Carter,
I'm sorry.
you should have never been in these cuffs." Reed stood slowly as the bailiff unlocked his cuffs. They clinked to the floor like dead weight, symbolic of the shame the system had tried to place on a man who had already carried too much. The courtroom was still, no whispers, no movement. Even the judge looked unsure whether to rise or remain seated. Admiral Preston gave a nod, then stepped aside to let Reed walk out first. But instead of leaving, Reed turned to face the room. His voice, calm but razor-sharp, finally broke the silence. "I never wanted medals. I never asked for a salute. I just wanted my brothers and sisters to make it home." Then his eyes scanned the prosecutors. "You were looking for a criminal. You found a quiet war." One of the younger recruits sitting in the back, still in training uniform, stood up and saluted. Slowly, others followed, soldiers, veterans, even court staff. A room full of people rose for the man they had nearly buried under bureaucracy. Reed didn't acknowledge it with a gesture or a smile. He simply nodded once, turned, and walked out. Outside, cameras flashed, but he ignored them. Preston followed him out, and for a moment, they stood side by side in the sunlight. "There's a new unit starting," the Admiral said. "They need someone like you." Reed gave a faint smile. "Tell them I'm done with war, but I'll train the ones who aren't." He disappeared into a waiting SUV, the doors closing like a book on a chapter few had known existed. The news headlines exploded later that day, but those who saw it unfold firsthand knew. They hadn't just witnessed a trial, they had witnessed history. And the legend of Reed Carter was no longer a secret. If the story moved you, show your support by hitting like and dropping a comment. Don't forget to subscribe to Unheard Heroes for more powerful untold stories.